happy to have you, Teodora, in Visio for the PCM4U channel. You're a specialist on cross-border access for patient to clinical trial. So as a first question, could you introduce yourself, your background, please?
Thank you very much, Loic. It's wonderful to join you today. So I'm Teodora Lalova-Spinks. I'm a lawyer by background, and I'm currently postdoctoral researcher at the University of Leuven in Belgium, KU Leuven. I defended my PhD this year on topics related to cross-border clinical research in general. So the legal framework for clinical trials in the European Union and heavy focused also on data protection. So anything to do with protecting the personal data of the patients involved in the studies. And during this PhD, I collaborated as well with EURTC, the European Organization for Research and Treatment of Cancer. And as part of the PhD, one of the most important studies was done in collaboration and by the initiative of the European Forum of Good Clinical Practice, EFGCP, and Dr. Ingrid Klingman, and it was focused on cross-border access to clinical trials. So this was a study done by a consortium of several partners, EFGCP, EURTC, advocates representing the patient's side and the patient voice, and KU Leuven, so my research group, under the supervision of Professor Isabel Hoyes, my supervisor. This study was done already 4 years ago, 2019, and I'll be very happy to tell more about the study as well in our discussion.
So could you tell us a little bit about the reality right now of cross-border access to clinical trials in Europe?
Thank you. Thanks a lot. So the study that we did in 2019, so it was right before COVID. So it will be very interesting also to compare results, what happened after COVID. So it was initiated by EFGCP. It was also supported with an unrestricted grant by FPA. And what we focused was to do a mixed method study. So starting from a literature search, is there anything in the law? Is there anything in the literature about the topic? And continuing with both quantitative and qualitative methods to gain the experience of stakeholders in the field. So we did a survey, a very large survey across Europe, in which we obtained almost 400 responses back then. And also we did follow-up and in parallel to the survey, semi-structured interviews with experts. So this was more than 30 experts from different stakeholder groups, really giving in-depth discussion on the topic. And the aim and the most interest in terms of stakeholders that participated came on the one side from the patient community, so patients, carers, and patient representatives, and also on the other side from investigators, from the physicians, but also we had sponsors participating in the study, both commercial and academic, and also policymakers, ethics committees, and so on. In terms of the study itself, we targeted to uncover both challenges for cross-border access, but also the motivations. And the main outcome of the study, to keep it short, was that we identified that currently cross-border access is very rarely occurring because of different challenges, but that there is a huge need that this is enabled in the field. And we also came up to a set of different proposals for recommendations to facilitate it. There is currently no legal framework to facilitate, but it was identified that the best way forward would be to provide more information about it, about the best practices in different countries, and also to create recommendations, multi-stakeholder recommendations across the field, how to do it. And here, again, under the leadership of Dr. Klingman, since last year, there is a new initiative continuing on these recommendations and steering further the work on that. It is called the EU XCT initiative, so the EU cross-border initiative. It's consisting of many different members from different expertise and specialties, also supported from FPA. And the work there is organized in 3 task forces. One that is in which I'm part, and we call it with Dr. Maren Koban, which is focusing on the legal, regulatory, and ethical aspects. We have also Task Force 2 and Task Force 3, focusing on the one side on the insurance aspects, the financial aspects, and also on the other sides on the patient's experience, the patient motivations, challenges, and so on, really gathering important information from the practical side. And all of these task forces at the moment do very important, very interesting work, because we have continued with so-called mapping exercises with surveys now at this moment to obtain information, what rules there are in the different countries, what is the experience of patients, of physicians, of sponsors, of CROs, and so on. And these surveys are actually currently ongoing as we speak. So this could be also an important call to mention. Anyone interested to provide input, experience, would be very, very welcome to have this work going and continuing.
So maybe to go a little bit in more detail about what you observed in your previous study, could you tell us so you tell us that it's quite rare that patients cross border to go to a clinical trial. Is it the same in every border, or are there borders that are more or less enabling the crossing for clinical trial? Well, could you tell us a little bit more details about that, please?
Thanks a lot for the question. Great point. So indeed, the situation across Europe is not the same everywhere. What we discovered in terms of, for instance, the interest to join trials abroad and the opportunities to join trials abroad, there was a huge discrepancy between Western Europe and Eastern Europe, maybe as to be expected because of the differences between the two regions. And also we discovered that there are actually good examples of allowing cross-border access between, for instance, neighboring countries. So, or for instance, when it comes to agreements that are bilateral agreements between hospitals in two different countries, allowing this and providing the opportunity for it. There is also ongoing great initiatives in the Nordics. So they're very, very far in achieving more possibilities for patients to cross borders. So for instance, here, it's great to refer to the Nordic NECT. So it's a network for early cancer trials, early cancer clinical research, and they have also established pathways and procedures to allow possibilities for that, and at least to look into the possibilities for that. So there are emerging initiatives, and the results would be difficult to say conclusively and to map conclusively. This is actually now the next step that we do with the EU-XCT, but in the preliminary results, it was shown that there are sometimes initiatives that try to do it, but it's locally, and there is nothing at EU level, and there is nothing systematic yet at this point, but to be uncovered in the future too.
So you told that inter-hospital agreements across two sides of a border could help. So how in practice, how do you do hospital agreement so that the patient could go either to an hospital to another, even if there is a border in between?
So on the agreements, on the concrete details, unfortunately, it was not part of the first work of the project. So we knew that there is existing initiatives. We knew the type of hospitals. Typically, it would be research hospitals, so university hospitals, finding the way to navigate the system. But that would be very important, very needed next question. What are the concrete rules? And that's what we are now trying to establish. And what are the concrete rules in terms of best practice between institutions, the hospitals, but also when it comes to the legal side, if there is any framework at the legal level, at the whole country. And also oftentimes what we uncovered and we're continuing to see now, when it comes to ethics committee advice. Oftentimes the research ethics committees, they assess the clinical trials, as we know, and they would have specific conditions or specific questions related to accepting a patient from abroad. It could be related to the informed consent, to the language that it should be used, to the need of translation or not. It could be various issues that would be different, and it would be coming from the ethics committees in the different countries.
So what impact do you see from European level I would say, legal framework to facilitate cross-border access? What could be the impact for the local different cross-border situations?
So going back to the first study that we did, so I'm basing myself on the study from 2019. So actually our starting point was the cross-border healthcare directive. And the cross-border healthcare directive, it doesn't include clinical research, but it sets rules for receiving healthcare abroad and being reimbursed for it. So it posed very interesting questions to the consortium, to Dr. Ingrid Klingman as well. Could there be an opening in it to think of a similar selection of rules and so on for clinical trials? Based on the results of the study that we did, we identified that for the moment, going for trying to change the cross-border healthcare directive is not the most practical and the most feasible solution. At the moment, at the same time, we are indeed in a stage of really a lot of important changes happening at the EU level. We could speak and we could think about the creation of the European health data space, the proposal that is currently very, very important to follow and to consider. And there is a lot of ongoing initiatives, very important initiatives related to health. So it is to be seen actually how it could best work, and should we indeed consider and evaluate whether we need to consider a legal change. At this stage, what was the agreement of the involved experts in the consortium was to focus on very practical solutions, focusing on best practices and focusing on the possibilities that currently exist, and also what, without necessarily going to change the law, which the process itself at EU level is quite long and it takes quite a lot of time to bring it, to make it feasible for the patients, but instead to focus on the practical changes that we could already more quickly provide for the patient community.
You told us about health data space, so there is clearly also a point into improving the information about clinical trials to the patients, whatever the country. So do you have analyzed a little bit this topic, and in order to, of course, increase the access to clinical trials by the information to patients?
It's a great question. It was also one of the important findings of the study that we did. So when it comes to information, that was one of the biggest challenges that we identified within the manuscript, within the paper, that it would be best to provide better information to the patient community, to the physicians as well, on the one side about the importance and the solutions provided with clinical trials, and on the other side, information related to how to access clinical trials. So there is a lot of work to be done as well on that, together as a community, as all involved experts and stakeholders. So this is very important. On the other side, maybe it's interesting to make a little note about the health data space. So with the health data space, it is broader than clinical trials. It is going to be there to provide and to, in a way, revolutionize the access to data. So to enable more data to be used for health research or for healthcare as well. So the health data space, it consists of two main building blocks. On the one side, primary use of data, so healthcare, and on the other side, secondary use of data, which is the scientific research, or also other permitted purposes like training algorithms and so on. So on this, at the moment, it's a very great moment for me as a lawyer as well, and for researchers in general, to follow the discussions happening at the level of the institutions, and to see how this important framework would be shaped, because it is going to be impacting very much on how do we process, how do we use data, personal data, and also anonymized non-personal data. So there is a lot of questions related to data protection, to IP, to informing patients, but more specifically about their own data. So, and the data that would be made available includes clinical trials as well, but it's a little bit, it's not directly linked at this stage with the access to a clinical trial, but could be indeed, as you mentioned it, an interesting question to keep in mind and to see if it can be brought to the discussions.
And maybe a practical question. As a lawyer, you can help the community knowing better about that. So in practice, when a patient wants to go abroad to have access to a clinical trial, to be included in a clinical trial. What are the steps required for a patient, at least in Europe, or if you want to give us an example of two countries, maybe it's restricted a little bit the situation. What are the steps? What would you recommend?
Well, it's a great question, but unfortunately, I'm not sure I can at this moment provide an answer, because it's actually part of what we aim to have with the UXCT. It's part of the biggest objectives, to be able to show steps to be able to help the patients navigate, and also the other stakeholders navigate the systems. For sure, what we identified already with the first study from 2019 is that it is often very local. So it would be often specific pathways that would allow patients to join. It would also sometimes be very often be linked to what the hospital itself abroad or the sponsor itself could provide, could facilitate. So it is very case by case, but definitely stay tuned for the results that we're going to have to present more specific pathways.
What's the main motivation that you analyzed on your survey about the patient going abroad for a clinical trial?
Very quickly, the motivations that we uncovered with the previous study for the patients to join a clinical trial abroad. And what came out most of the times within the interviews and the survey, it was related to access to experimental treatments. Oftentimes, when it comes to rare diseases, to specific diseases where all available pathways for therapy have been exhausted, the experimental treatment, the clinical trial could be the last hope for the patients. So that was a big finding to realize the importance. Of course, keeping in mind that clinical trials, again, it is experimental, so it's really research and the patient's life. But when the life of the patient, when your life depends on it, of course, the objective would be to join the trial wherever it is. So that was a big finding, and to keep us perhaps the main goal, it is about people, and it is about the patients.
Yeah, you're right. And on this topic, we have another video on the interview of a patient that came from Belgium to come to Lyon, and clearly it motivated to broaden this topic and to have different stakeholders coming into giving their experience on this topic. So that's great that you mentioned it. Very nice. Thanks a lot, Teodora. So being here to answer our multiple questions, and it gave a large view of the access to clinical trial for patients. So thanks a lot, and hope to have you soon have the results of your current studies.
Thank you very much, and look forward as well to all of your work and to the future exchange and collaborations on this important topic.